"This is my sister Nora," Serena announced, hooking her fingers around my wrist before I could walk away. She pulled me toward her billionaire father-in-law and laughed. "She's the failure of our family. 42, divorced, no kids, and still pretending that little hospital job is a career." My mother smiled. Actually smiled. When I tried to pull my hand free, Serena tightened her grip and hissed through the perfect bridal smile she had practiced for months. "Don't make a scene at my wedding." Something inside me went very still. I looked down at her fingers around my wrist, then peeled them away one by one. "Then, stop making me the joke." The laughter around us died so quickly I could hear the quartet playing on the other side of the ballroom. Howard Bell stared at me. "Nora Keating?" he said slowly. "Harbor North?" Serena's smile twitched. I nodded. "The pediatric redevelopment. The $60 million project?" "Yes." Howard pushed his chair back and stood. "I remember exactly who you are." Serena grabbed my arm again. "What the hell did you do?" I looked down at her hand. "Take it off me." This time, she did. And that was the first boundary my sister had obeyed in years. I just didn't know yet that by the following night, I would discover something much worse than being humiliated at her wedding. My family had been using the career they mocked behind my back. The ballroom at the Belmont Hotel looked like someone had been given unlimited money and told to make winter look expensive. White roses climbed 8-foot gold frames. Hundreds of candles flickered beneath crystal chandeliers. The dance floor had Serena and Ethan's initials projected across it in soft light, and every table had menus printed on paper thick enough to qualify as building material. Serena belonged in that room. She always had a gift for entering a space as though everyone else had been waiting for her. At 30, my half-sister could walk into a restaurant wearing something simple and somehow make 3 people ask where she bought it. She had built a lifestyle business around that ability, first online, then through events, sponsorships, and partnerships. My mother called her an entrepreneur before Serena had earned enough to pay her own phone bill. I had worked in crisis communications for nearly 2 decades. According to my family, I worked at a hospital. Those were not the same sentence. But I had stopped correcting them years ago. Or at least I thought I had. Howard Bell extended his hand to me. He was in his mid-60s, silver-haired, formal without seeming stiff. The kind of man whose name appeared on buildings but who, at that moment, was looking at me as if he were trying to pull a memory into focus. "The community meeting," he said. I knew immediately which one he meant. That was a long night. His mouth lifted slightly. "It was a terrible night." "That too." He gave a short laugh. Serena stood beside us, visibly trying to understand why the conversation had continued without her permission. Howard turned to her. "The pediatric complex was one of our most difficult developments." Serena's eyes flicked toward me. "Oh, Nora never really talks about work." That was almost funny. I talked about work. My family just stopped listening whenever the subject could not be converted into Serena. A family crisis, or something they needed me to fix. Howard looked back at me. "My team had a public statement ready about relocating the neighborhood clinic. I remember. You refused to release it. I recommended holding it until the hospital confirmed the relocation plan. My people were not happy with you." "I remember that too." This time he laughed more openly. Then his expression softened. "My wife had been involved with that pediatric project from the beginning. I knew his wife had died several years earlier, but I had never met her." Howard continued. "She spent years pushing us to stay involved. I followed that project more closely than most because of her. That night, I wanted the statement out. I wanted the controversy gone." I remembered the conference room. The fluorescent lights. 4 different executives talking over one another. A draft statement printed in front of me containing a sentence I knew we could not verify. And me saying, for what felt like the 15th time, if we publish something that turns out not to be true, the correction becomes the story. Howard looked at me now and said, "You were the one who made us wait." "I was one of the people who recommended it." "No." He shook his head. "I remember that room. You were the one who wouldn't move." My mother gave a little laugh from beside Serena. "Nora has always been stubborn." There it was. A compliment passed through my mother and came out as a defect. Howard glanced at her, then back at me. In that case, stubborn saved us a great deal of trouble. Serena's jaw tightened. For years, Nora is stubborn had meant difficult. Nora is careful had meant anxious. Nora asks too many questions had meant exhausting. Apparently, all it took was a billionaire saying the same traits differently for the room to hear them as competence. I hated that part most. Not because Howard had done anything wrong. Because some small, bruised piece of me enjoyed hearing it. I was 42 years old, and for one humiliating second, I still wanted to turn to my mother and say, "See? See what I became? See that somebody noticed?" That realization embarrassed me more than Serena's joke. Howard was pulled away by another guest before the conversation could go further. He shook my hand once more. "I'm glad to see you're still doing the work." "Thank you." Then he left. No job offer. No dramatic promise. No declaration that his new daughter-in-law had made some unforgivable mistake. Just recognition. It should have been a small thing. It wasn't. Serena waited until he was several yards away before turning on me. "What was that?" I picked up my glass. "What was what?" "Don't do that." "Do what?" "That calm voice where you pretend you don't know exactly what you're doing." I almost laughed. For years, my calm voice had been one of the few things my family liked about me, usually because they wanted me to use it on someone else. A vendor. An insurance company. A relative. A restaurant manager. Anyone who needed to be handled. Now it was apparently suspicious. Serena folded her arms. "Why didn't you tell me you knew Howard?" "I don't know Howard." "He knew you." "I worked on a project involving his company." "That's not what it sounded like." "What did it sound like?" She lowered her voice. "Like you were trying to make me look stupid." I stared at her. 5 minutes earlier, Serena had introduced me to a room full of people as the failure of our family. Now I was responsible for making her look stupid because the joke had failed. My mother appeared beside us before I could answer. "Nora." One word. My full name was not necessary. I knew the tone. It had meant the same thing since childhood. "Be careful. Be reasonable. Be the one who stops this." Mom touched Serena's elbow. "This is her wedding. Let's not turn the evening into some competition." I looked at her. I didn't. Serena gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "You could have said something before." "Like what?" "That you'd worked with Howard." "I worked across a conference table from people in his company 11 years ago." "You clearly made an impression. And somehow that's my fault?" Mom's mouth tightened. "Nora." There it was again. The warning. Usually that was where I backed down. I would soften my voice. Make a joke. Tell Serena she looked beautiful. Tell Mom I was tired. Invent some explanation that gave Serena she looked beautiful. Tell Mom I was tired. Invent some explanation that gave everyone a path out without admitting what had happened. I knew how to do it because I had practiced for most of my life. Instead, I said. I answered his question. Serena created the comparison. Then I walked away. My heart was hammering by the time I reached the corridor outside the ballroom. It was ridiculous. I had handled angry reporters, board members, grieving families, union representatives, executives, community protests, and once a television crew that showed up outside a hospital before our own CEO knew why they were there. But walking away from my mother without making sure she was no longer upset made my hands shake. That was how old some habits were. I stood beside a tall window overlooking the city and took a slow breath. Behind me, someone said, "Your mother always said you were the independent one." I turned. Aunt Margaret stood holding champagne and smiling at me. "She was just telling us how you never needed much looking after, even as a girl." Independent. Another family word that changed meaning depending on who was being protected. I smiled automatically. Then the hallway disappeared for a moment, replaced by the kitchen in the first house we lived in after my mother married Martin. I was 13. Serena was barely walking. Mom was trying to put on earrings while shouting from the bedroom that she and Martin were late. "Nora, keep an eye on your sister." "I had homework. I have a science test tomorrow." "You can study after she's asleep." "I've been watching her all afternoon." Mom appeared in the doorway, already annoyed. "Nora, please. You're older, you understand." I remembered the strange warmth those words gave me. Older. Trusted. Mature. Different. I did understand. So I picked Serena up. Years later, when Serena wanted the larger bedroom, I understood. When I had plans but Serena needed a ride, I understood. When Mom said Serena was going through something and I should not upset her, I understood. Understanding became our family's nicest word for surrender. Aunt Margaret was still talking. Your mother used to say you practically raised yourself. I looked back toward the ballroom. For the first time, the sentence did not sound like praise. Apparently I did, I said. Margaret blinked. I excused myself before she could ask what I meant. By dessert, everyone behaved as if nothing had happened. That was another family talent. My father had died when I was young enough that some memories of him felt more like photographs than events. Mom married Martin when I was 12. Serena came the following year. There was never a formal announcement that Serena was the easier daughter to love. Families rarely work that cleanly. Instead, there were thousands of tiny decisions. If Serena cried, we stopped. If I cried, I was tired. If Serena quit something, she was finding herself. If I changed direction, I was wasting an opportunity. If Serena made a mistake, she needed help. If I made one, I should have known better. And because I was 12 years older, there was always an explanation ready. You're older. You understand. By the time Serena graduated from college, I had become the person the family contacted when something went wrong. Not because they respected my judgment, because they expected access to it. A website vendor threatened Serena with a cancellation fee. Send it to Nora. Martin had an insurance denial. Nora could call. Mom needed a speech for a charity luncheon. Nora writes things. Serena had an angry customer. Nora knows PR. The funniest part was that my family joked about how seriously I took documentation. Nora keeps receipts, Serena liked to say. I did. Not because I was secretly preparing a case against anyone. Because, in crisis communications, version control mattered. If 5 executives edited the same statement, I needed to know which version had been approved, when it changed, and who had seen it. My files were boring. Dates. Project names. Versions. Nothing mysterious. Nothing dramatic. At least, they had never been dramatic before. I left the wedding shortly after 10:30. Serena did not say goodbye. Mom did. She kissed my cheek near the coat check and whispered, I wish you could have just let her have one day. There were 100 responses I could have given. I chose none of them. I put on my coat. Good night, Mom. Her expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough that I noticed. She had expected an explanation. Maybe an apology. Maybe reassurance that I loved Serena and was not jealous and had not meant to make anything awkward. I gave her none. Then I went home. The next morning, my phone showed 4 messages from Serena. The first was about Howard. The second accused me of making her feel humiliated. The third said she did not want to fight during her honeymoon. The fourth said, Can you at least look over the thank you post before it goes up? Mom says it sounds stiff. I stared at it for almost a minute. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the alternative was throwing my coffee cup. She had called me a failure in front of her new family. Less than 12 hours later, she wanted the failure to fix her writing. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. The old Nora would have done it. I could see the sequence almost perfectly. I would correct the post. Serena would publish it. Mom would decide the wedding conflict had blown over. Nobody would apologize. And by next Christmas, the story would become a family joke about how Howard Bell had mistaken Nora for someone important. I put my phone face down. I did not answer. That evening, after work, I kicked off my shoes inside my townhouse and carried my laptop to the kitchen counter. I rented the place. Mom occasionally referred to that fact as evidence that my life was still temporary. I had stopped telling her that I liked renting. After my divorce, I did not want another property, another joint account, another decision that required someone else's signature. The townhouse had 2 bedrooms. One was mine, the other I had turned into an office. For 3 years, no one had moved my things without asking. There was freedom in that which I had not fully appreciated yet. I had just opened leftover soup when my work-adjacent personal email chimed. The sender was unfamiliar. The subject line wasn't. Final Communications Review. Serena Mercer Initiative. I stopped with the spoon halfway to my mouth. Serena had been working for months on a charitable initiative connected to her lifestyle company. I knew the broad idea: mentorship, grants, community partnerships. I had helped her once. I opened the message. The committee chair thanked me for agreeing to review final launch messaging and for serving as an informal communications advisor during the rollout. I read the sentence again, then a third time. I had agreed to nothing of the sort. For several seconds, I felt the old reflex rise. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe Serena had asked and I had casually said yes. Maybe there was a conversation I had forgotten. That reflex had saved my family a lot of accountability over the years. Before believing someone else had crossed a line, I first searched for a way the line might not exist. I opened my archive. Serena's project name produced several emails, mostly forwarded announcements and family updates. Then I found the one I remembered. April 18th. Subject: Can you look at this? Attached: Serena launch draft, docx. I had downloaded it, reviewed the copy, and saved my annotated version, according to habit. 2026-0418. Serena launch, V1. NK comments. DEISEX. I opened my reply. There it was, clear enough that I felt my pulse change as I read it. I'll look at this one as your sister. I can flag messaging issues, but please don't describe this as professional approval or an advisory role. I'm not involved with the organization. I leaned back from the screen. I had not forgotten. I had not been unclear. I had said exactly what I meant. The committee's email was still open beside it. Thank you for agreeing to serve as an informal communications advisor. 2 statements. 2 completely different realities. My phone buzzed on the counter. Mom. I almost ignored it. Then I noticed the preview. Please don't embarrass Serena over something harmless. I stopped breathing for a second. I had not called Mom. I had not called Serena. I had not answered the committee yet. There was no reason for my mother to know I had even opened that email. Unless she already knew what it said. I sat down. A second message appeared. She's had enough stress after what happened at the wedding. Just let this go until after the launch. I looked from Mom's message to my April email. Something uncomfortable shifted into place. Yesterday, my family had laughed while Serena called my career a failure. Today, they needed that same career attached to her name. I opened a reply to the committee. My fingers trembled slightly, but not because I did not know what to say. I knew exactly what to say. I wrote, "Thank you for reaching out. Before my name is used in connection with the initiative, I need to clarify what I have and have not agreed to. I reviewed one draft several months ago as a personal favor to Serena. I did not agree to serve as an advisor, and I have not reviewed or approved subsequent materials." I stopped. Read it. Removed one sentence that sounded emotional. Read it again. Then, saved it as a draft. For most of my life, a family problem had meant one thing: fix it before anyone became angry with me. That night, for the first time, I wondered what would happen if I fixed only the part that actually belonged to me: my own name, my own work, my own consent. Before I could press send, another message from Mom appeared. "Don't correct them yet. Serena already told everyone you were helping." I stared at those words. And suddenly the wedding felt very far away. Because my sister calling me a failure in front of a billionaire was humiliating. But humiliation was no longer the problem. Someone had been speaking for me. And I was finally about to find out for how long. The message from Mom stayed on the screen long enough for the words to lose their shape. "Don't correct them yet. Serena already told everyone you were helping." The soup on the counter had gone cold. Outside the kitchen window, headlights moved through the wet street below, white streaks sliding across the glass and disappearing. For years, I had been trained to respond to sentences like that with urgency. Who had Serena told? How many people? What would happen if I embarrassed her? How quickly could I make the problem smaller? That night, another question came first. What, exactly, had been said in my name? I closed Mom's messages without answering and turned back to my laptop. The reply to the committee was still sitting in drafts. 3 short paragraphs. No accusations, no mention of Serena's wedding, no mention of Diane, nothing about being mocked in front of Howard Bell. Just facts. I had reviewed one draft. I had done it as a personal favor. I had explicitly declined an advisory role. I had not approved later materials. My name should not be presented as an endorsement. I read it once more, then pressed send. The click was almost disappointingly quiet. No thunder. No shattered windows. No great sense of triumph. Just a small whoosh from the computer speakers. For several seconds, I stared at the sent confirmation and waited for the guilt. It came. Of course it did. A familiar pressure settled beneath my ribs, as though somewhere Serena was already crying, and somehow I had caused it by refusing to let strangers believe something untrue. I stood, carried the untouched soup to the refrigerator, and filled a glass of water. Then I did something I had learned to do professionally long before I understood I needed it personally. I built a record. Not a case against anyone. A record. I opened the email thread with Serena from April 18th. Her original message had been casual. "Can you look at this? Mom says the introduction sounds too corporate." Attached was the launch draft. I had reviewed it after work, making comments about tone, clarity, and one paragraph that implied the initiative already had partnerships that were still being discussed. Then I had saved my copy the way I saved every work document that mattered. Date. Project. Version. Initials. The file was still in the folder where I had left it. I opened my sent email again. "I'll look at this one as your sister. I can flag messaging issues, but please don't describe this as professional approval or an advisory role. I'm not involved with the organization." There was no ambiguity in it. That should have relieved me. Instead, something colder moved through me. For most of my life, I had been told that I remembered conflict too sharply, that I kept score, that I held on to wording nobody else cared about. Sitting at my kitchen counter, looking at a sentence I had written months earlier, I understood how dangerous that accusation had been. If you can convince someone that remembering clearly is a character flaw, you never have to explain why your version keeps changing. My phone lit up again. "Serena." I let it ring twice before answering. "What did you do?" she said. "No hello." I leaned against the counter. I corrected my role. "You emailed the committee." "They emailed me first." "You could have talked to me." "I'm talking to you now." Her breath came sharply through the phone. "Do you have any idea how this makes me look?" There it was again. Not what happened. Not whether the information was true. How it looked. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "I told them you were helping." "How?" A pause. "What do you mean, how? Did you tell them I reviewed one draft? Did you say I was your sister doing you a favor? Did you call me an advisor?" "You're making this sound sinister." I asked 3 questions. Serena went quiet. Years earlier, that silence would have made me fill it for her. I would have softened the question, told her I was not angry, explained that I only wanted to understand. This time, I waited. Finally, she said, "Mom said you agreed to help with communications." I looked at the April email still open on my laptop. "Did Mom show you something I wrote?" "She sent me a message." "Send it to me." Another pause. "Nora, send me exactly what she sent you. Don't summarize it." Her voice cooled. "You really are keeping receipts now. You used to think that was funny. That was before you started treating me like a suspect. I'm treating your statement like a statement. If Mom told you I agreed, send me what she sent." For a moment, I thought Serena would hang up. Instead, my phone buzzed. A screenshot appeared. Mom's message to Serena had been sent the same day I reviewed the draft. Nora looked it over. She said she's happy to help with communications. You know how she is. She likes to make everything sound more official than it is. I read it twice. Then I turned back to my original email. "Please don't describe this as professional approval or an advisory role." The 2 messages sat side by side. Same day. Same subject. Different meaning. Serena's voice came through the phone. "Well?" I swallowed. "Mom left something out." "What?" I told her the opposite. "That's not possible." I almost smiled at the phrase. Not because it was funny. Because it was so familiar. "Give me your email address," I said. "You know my email address. I want you to confirm where you want me to send it." She did. I forwarded only the message I had written. Nothing private from work. Nothing from the committee. Just the sentence that belonged to me. For nearly half a minute, Serena said nothing. Then, quieter. "Maybe Mom misunderstood you." Maybe. I meant it. I was not ready to make a larger accusation from one message. But I was no longer willing to ignore the gap just because the most comfortable explanation required me to. Serena exhaled. This is exactly what I didn't want after the wedding. You didn't want what? Drama. I looked through the dark kitchen toward the second bedroom I had turned into an office after my divorce. Serena, you called me a failure in front of your new family yesterday. That was a joke. And tonight, strangers emailed me because they think I work for your initiative. I said I was sorry about the joke. You haven't. Silence again. This one felt different. Not defensive. Caught. I have to go, she said. Okay. Nora? Yes? You're not going to contact Howard about this, are you? The question was so absurd that I straightened. No. Because this has nothing to do with him. I agree. Good. She hung up. I remained standing with the phone in my hand. Howard Bell had become the largest thing in Serena's imagination because he had money, status, and the power to judge the image she had worked so hard to build. But he was almost irrelevant to the problem in front of me. That realization mattered. The most important thing that had happened at the wedding was not that a billionaire remembered my work. It was that, for once, the family joke had been spoken in front of someone who did not know he was supposed to laugh. The next morning, the committee replied. Their chair thanked me for clarifying and said they would update their records before the launch. She asked whether I could confirm that the annotated April draft was the only material I had reviewed. I could. I answered yes, and attached the exact email thread that established the scope of that review. Nothing more. No speculation. No accusations. By lunchtime, a calendar reminder appeared on my work screen for a meeting with Elena Brooks. Elena had worked with me for 6 years, and had the rare ability to read a sentence without also trying to read the person who wrote it. I trusted that. At the end of our meeting, after we had finished discussing an unrelated hospital announcement, I said, "Can I ask you something hypothetical?" She closed her notebook. You never ask hypothetical questions with that face. Despite myself, I smiled. I explained the professional part only. A relative's charitable project. One draft. An email limiting my involvement. An outside group describing me as an advisor. No names. No wedding. No billionaire. Elena listened without interrupting. What do you want to happen? She asked. The question stopped me. Not, what can they do to you? Not, who's wrong? What do you want? I want the record to be accurate. Then keep it that narrow. I already sent a clarification. Good. I have the original draft and the email. Those are yours? Yes. She sent me the draft directly. I saved my annotated copy. Then keep your own record. Don't go digging through anything you weren't given. Don't forward internal material if someone sends it by mistake. And don't speculate about why your name was used. I wasn't planning to. I know. She picked up her notebook again, then paused. Nora, you don't have to prove bad intent to say, I didn't agree to this. The sentence followed me back to my office. It sounded obvious. That was what bothered me. How many obvious things had I turned into moral puzzles because the person crossing the line shared my blood? That afternoon, I received no messages from Serena. Mom waited until I was home. Her name appeared on my phone just as I was setting a grocery bag on the counter. I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then I answered. Nora, what were you thinking? Not hello. Apparently nobody in the family was using greetings anymore. I corrected something inaccurate. You humiliated Serena. The committee contacted me. You could have waited. For what? Until after the launch. And let them use my name until then? Mom sighed loudly enough to make sure I heard it. You always do this. I gripped the edge of the counter. Do what? Make everything technical. Make everything sound like a contract. It's my professional name. It's your sister. Those two sentences sat on opposite sides of the conversation like doors. Mom continued. Serena is already embarrassed enough after what happened at the wedding. She's sensitive right now. I closed my eyes. There it was. Sensitive. The word had done astonishing amounts of work in our house. When Serena was 13 and screamed at me for borrowing a sweater, she was sensitive. When she was 20 and forgot Mom's birthday because she was on a trip, she was overwhelmed. When she abandoned a business commitment and I had to help clean up the fallout, She was under pressure. I was older. I understood. You're older, Nora, Mom said, as if she had heard the memory. My eyes opened. No. A beat of silence. What? No. Don't use that. Use what? You're older. I'm 42. Serena is 30. This isn't about who needs to share a toy. That's a cruel way to describe your relationship. No. It's a precise way to describe this conversation. Mom's voice tightened. You could leave your name on it for a few weeks and step back quietly after the launch. No one would be harmed. I looked at the grocery bag. One tomato had rolled loose and was resting against the base of a chair. A ridiculous detail to remember, but I knew I would remember it. No. Nora. I already corrected it. You can correct the correction. I almost laughed. You want me to tell them the first inaccurate version was actually accurate? I want you to support your sister. I did support her. I reviewed one draft. And now you're punishing her for trusting you. That sentence landed differently. Not because it was more painful. Because I could hear the mechanism inside it. I had given something freely. Somewhere along the way, that gift had become an obligation. Then my refusal to give more had become punishment. I'm not discussing this anymore, I said. Mom's tone changed. Cooler now. You should think very carefully about what you're doing to this family. I have. I ended the call. My thumb shook when it touched the screen. For several seconds, the kitchen was too quiet. Then the family group chat began lighting up. Mom had moved fast. I watched without opening it immediately. 3 messages. Then 6, then 9. When I finally looked, Diane had written, I hope everyone understands that Nora has chosen to create unnecessary problems for Serena at the worst possible time. We have tried to keep this private. Aunt Margaret replied with a sad face reaction. My cousin Leslie wrote, What happened? Then Aunt Carol. Can't you just support your sister for once? My fingers began moving before I had made a conscious decision. I typed. I have supported Serena for years. I reviewed her materials, helped with her business, fixed emails, handled vendor issues, and I am tired of being treated as though none of that counts unless I agree to every new request. The committee contacted me because someone represented my role inaccurately, and I have every right to protect my professional reputation. This has nothing to do with jealousy or the wedding, and if anyone had bothered to ask me before deciding what happened, I stopped. The paragraph filled most of the screen. My heart was beating too fast. I read it once. Then I deleted every word. A new message from Mom appeared. Nora? The old invitation. Explain yourself. Prove you are good. Make us comfortable. I typed one sentence. My professional role has been corrected. I won't discuss it in the family chat. Send. Within 30 seconds, Mom replied. Unbelievable. I put the phone down. The strangest thing happened next. Nothing. The room stayed standing. No one came through the door. My job did not vanish. My lungs kept working. I had spent years treating disapproval like a fire alarm. That night, I discovered sometimes it was only noise. I heated dinner and ate it at the table, instead of beside my phone. Afterward, I opened my laptop for a reason that had nothing to do with Serena. Several months earlier, the hospital network's professional education director had invited me to guest teach a weekend session on crisis communication ethics. I had never answered. The first proposed weekend conflicted with Mom's annual fundraising luncheon, where I was normally expected to help with wording. The second was near Serena's engagement party. By the third email, I had told myself I was too busy. The truth looked different now. I had kept entire sections of my calendar empty in case someone related to me needed them. The invitation was still there. I clicked reply. Thank you for thinking of me. I'd like to discuss the fall session if the opportunity is still available. I read it. No one needed permission. I sent it. A minute later, my phone buzzed. Serena. For a moment I assumed the family chat had sent her back to fight round 2. Her message was shorter than I expected. Can I ask you something? I waited. Another bubble appeared. Mom always told me you blamed me for London. My hand went still on the mouse. London. I had not said that word aloud in years. 11 years earlier, I had been offered a 6-month fellowship with a communications team in London. It was the first opportunity I had ever received, that felt entirely mine. Martin had recently undergone surgery. He was home and recovering. Serena was 19. Mom called me 3 nights before I had to give my answer and told me Serena was barely holding herself together. She's terrified something will happen to Martin, Mom had said. She needs stability. She needs you. I could still remember sitting on the edge of my bed after that call, staring at the acceptance paperwork. London felt selfish. Staying felt mature. I declined the fellowship. For years afterward, some part of me had resented Serena for how little she seemed to understand what I had given up. I had never told her that. I had never needed to. In my mind, she knew. She had needed me. I had stayed. That was the story. Serena's next message arrived. I never asked you to stay. My throat tightened. Before I could answer, another message appeared. I found something in my old email. Then, a screenshot. Not from Mom. From Serena's own sent folder. The date was 11 years earlier. The recipient was Diane. The subject concerned me. The message was only 2 lines. Please tell Nora not to stay because of me. She should go. I leaned closer to the screen as though distance could change the words. It didn't. For 11 years, I had remembered London as one of the clearest examples of what being an older sister had cost me. Serena had spent those same 11 years believing I had chosen to stay and blamed her anyway. I read the email again. Then I looked at the message Mom had sent Serena about the charity draft. Nora said she's happy to help. 2 different years. 2 different sacrifices. And suddenly, the same question sat beneath both of them. What else had reached us only after passing through our mother first? For a long time, I sat at the kitchen table, with Serena's old email glowing on the screen. Please tell Nora not to stay because of me. She should go. 11 years earlier, I had packed that 6-month fellowship into a neat little box in my memory and labeled it sacrifice. Serena needed me. Mom asked. I stayed. That version had been so solid that I had built years of resentment on top of it. Now one email had cracked the foundation. My phone buzzed again. Serena wrote, "Are you there?" I typed, "Yes." Then erased it. There was too much to say through a screen, and suddenly I no longer trusted conversations that could be forwarded, shortened, interpreted, or explained by somebody who wasn't part of them. Can we meet tomorrow? I wrote instead. Serena responded almost immediately. Just us? I stared at those 2 words. Just us. At 42 years old, I could not remember the last time my sister and I had sat down to discuss anything important without Mom already having explained what one of us supposedly thought about the other. Just us, I replied. Serena chose a cafe halfway between her apartment and my office. She was already sitting near the back when I arrived the next afternoon, sunglasses folded beside her coffee and both hands wrapped around the cup. For the first time since the wedding, she looked like my younger sister instead of a bride in photographs designed to last forever. I put my bag on the empty chair beside me. Before Serena could speak, I said, "I need one rule." Her shoulders stiffened. "Of course you do." The response was so familiar that I nearly smiled. "See? That." "What?" You hear a boundary and immediately hear criticism. Serena looked away. I opened my laptop but left the screen dark. No more telling me what Mom says you feel. No more telling me what she says you meant. If you want me to know what you said, tell me yourself. Serena rubbed her thumb across the cardboard sleeve around her cup. And you'll do the same? Yes. No. Mom says Serena needs this. Yes. No. Mom says Serena is upset. Yes. She studied me. You make it sound like we need diplomatic relations. We might. A reluctant smile touched her mouth and disappeared. Then Serena took a breath. "I'm sorry about the wedding." I said nothing. Her eyes came up to mine. "I mean it." "For what?" A flash of irritation crossed her face. I recognized it because I had seen it since she was a teenager. Serena liked apologies best when the other person accepted them before she had to specify the offense. This time, she caught herself. "For calling you a failure," she said. "For doing it in front of Ethan's father. For grabbing you when you tried to walk away." The memory of her fingers tightening around my wrist came back with unpleasant clarity. "Why did you do it?" Serena looked down into her coffee. "It was a joke." "That explains why the words were familiar. It doesn't explain why you used them there." She said nothing. I waited. A server dropped a spoon somewhere behind the counter. The sharp metal sound cut through the quiet between us. Serena finally said, "Mom kept telling me Howard respects people who build things. Founders, risk takers, people who don't play safe. And I wanted him to think I was that person. You are an entrepreneur. Why did you need me to be a failure for that to be true?" Her fingers tightened around the cup. "Because you always do this." "Do what?" "Walk into a room acting like none of it matters, and then people discover you've done something impressive." I blinked. Serena continued before I could answer. "You don't post about work, you don't talk about promotions, you don't make a big deal about anything. Mom always says you act above all that." "I don't act above it. That's how it feels." "To you? Or to Mom?" Her mouth closed. There it was again. That tiny space, where another person's interpretation had lived so long it felt like memory. Serena looked toward the window. "Mom said Howard would probably think your career was respectable but boring. She said he admired people who took chances. I didn't want him comparing us." "So you made the comparison first." Serena nodded once. "You wanted him to know which sister mattered before he could decide for himself." Her face tightened. "That sounds horrible when you say it like that." "It was horrible when you did it." She flinched. "For years, that would have been the moment I rescued her. I would have added something softer. But you were stressed. It was your wedding. I know you didn't mean it." Instead, I let the truth stay where I had placed it. Serena took a slow breath. "Yes," she said. "I wanted to humiliate you." The honesty hurt less than another excuse would have. Maybe because it belonged to her. Not Mom. Not Martin. Not some family translation passed from mouth to mouth until no one could remember who had actually spoken first. Serena reached into her bag and slid her phone across the table. "I brought the London email. I have the screenshot." "I know. I thought you should see the thread." The messages were from Serena's own account. Nothing had been pulled from somebody else's device or account. She had searched her sent mail after our conversation and found the old exchange herself. The first message was the one she had shown me. "Please tell Nora not to stay because of me. She should go." Mom's reply came several hours later. "Don't worry about Nora. She understands what this family needs right now." That was all. No promise to deliver Serena's message. No explicit refusal. Just a sentence I had heard in a dozen forms. "She understands." I handed the phone back. "When did you send this?" "The night before you told everyone you weren't going." The cafe blurred at the edges. 11 years earlier, I had been 31 and sitting on the edge of a bed covered with open luggage. Not because I had started packing. Because I wanted to know what leaving would feel like. A blue sweater, 2 pairs of shoes, a travel adapter I had bought before making the decision, as though spending $20 could force me to become brave. Mom called around 9. Martin had undergone surgery less than 2 weeks before. By then he was home, walking short distances and complaining about daytime television. The crisis had passed. Or I thought it had. Mom's voice was quiet. "Nora, I'm worried about Serena." "What happened?" "She's not coping." "With Martin?" "With everything." I remembered standing from the bed. "What does that mean?" "She barely sleeps. She's terrified something is going to happen to him." "Did she tell you that?" A pause. "She doesn't have to tell me. I'm her mother." I had accepted that answer. Of course I had. Mom knew Serena. Mom lived with Serena. Mom saw things I didn't. "You know your sister," Diane had continued. "She won't ask you to give anything up." That sentence came back so clearly that I gripped the edge of the cafe table. "She won't ask you." At the time, it had sounded noble. Serena was too considerate to ask. Which meant I had to offer before she did. Mom had never technically said, "Serena asked you to stay." She had not needed to. By the end of the call, I was the one saying, "Maybe London isn't the right timing." Mom had gone quiet, giving me space to arrive at the sacrifice myself. Then she said, "This is what family does." 2 days later, I declined the fellowship. Across the cafe, Serena watched me. "What did she tell you?" I looked at her. "That you were barely sleeping. That you were terrified about Martin. That you needed stability." Serena's forehead creased. "I was scared about Dad." "I know. But not like that. He was already home. I know that now. I told her you should go. I know that now too. Her voice dropped. So you thought I wanted you to stay? For 11 years. Serena stared at her coffee. I thought you chose to stay, and then hated me for it. I didn't hate you. You acted like you did. That landed harder. Because there was truth in it. After London, something in me had hardened around Serena. I became quicker to notice every favor that went unreturned. Every time she called with a problem. Every holiday where she arrived late and I had already helped Mom cook, set the table, fix the printer, pick up prescriptions, and solve whatever emergency had appeared that morning. I had never said, I gave up London because of you. But resentment rarely needs a formal announcement. It finds other languages, a shorter answer, a colder look, a favor completed without warmth. I was angry, I said. At me. Yes. For something I told her I didn't want. Yes. Neither of us spoke. That was the first moment I understood how efficient the system had been. Mom had not needed to make either daughter hate the other. She only needed each of us to carry one missing piece. Serena broke the silence. There are things she told me about you too. My stomach tightened. Tell me. She said you thought my business was embarrassing. I thought your first business plan was terrible. A small laugh escaped Serena before she could stop it. It was terrible. I told you to your face. I know. What did Mom say? That you thought I was shallow. That you said I'd never finish anything because I cared more about being seen succeeding than actually doing the work. I sat back. I never said that. She said you did. When? After that vendor mess at Thanksgiving. I remembered the incident. I had spent most of an afternoon helping Serena rewrite an apology after she failed to deliver something promised to a small supplier. What I had told Mom afterward was that Serena needed a system, not another rescue. Apparently that sentence had traveled. Just not intact. Serena continued. She also told me you didn't want me calling during your divorce. The noise in the cafe seemed to drop away. What? After you moved out, I asked if I should come over. Mom said you didn't want anyone seeing you like that. For a moment, I was back inside the townhouse 3 years earlier. Cardboard boxes along the wall. 2 wine glasses wrapped in newspaper, even though only one of them would ever be mine again. A mattress still on the floor, because I had been too exhausted to assemble the frame. Mom had brought food on the second day. I remembered asking, has Serena called? Mom had put containers into my refrigerator. She wants to give you space. I had looked at the silent phone on the counter and thought, of course she does. Serena was always there when she needed something. When I was the one collapsing, she gave me space. The memory had hardened into evidence. Now Serena unlocked her phone again. I found this too. An old email. Let me know when she's ready. I don't want to push her. Sent to Diane. I read it once, then handed the phone back. You did ask. Yes. And she told me you wanted to give me space. She told me you didn't want me there. Something moved through me that was not quite anger. Anger was too simple. It felt more like discovering that a wall in your house had been built 3 feet away from where the plans said it should be. And suddenly, every room made sense for the wrong reason. I looked at Serena. We need to stop trying to decide what Mom intended. Her eyebrows rose. I thought that was the whole point. No, not yet. I opened my laptop. If we start with why she did it, we'll spend all afternoon guessing. What are you doing? What I do when people keep telling different versions of the same event. I created a blank document, 3 columns. Under the first, I typed what I directly know. Under the second, what Serena directly knows. Under the third, what reached us through Mom. Serena stared. You really do make everything into a spreadsheet. It's a table. That distinction is exactly why people make fun of you. Keep talking, and I'm adding a 4th column for insults. She laughed. A real one this time. For the next hour, we chose only a few events. London. My divorce. The charity draft. A Christmas disagreement from several years earlier, when I had been told Serena did not want me at dinner until I apologized, while Serena remembered being told I had refused to come. We did not have documentation for that one, so I marked it differently. Unverified. Serena pointed at the word. You don't believe me? I believe that's what you remember being told. That's different from knowing what happened. She considered that. Fair. The word felt almost unfamiliar between us. By the time we stopped, the third column was longer than either of the first two. Not proof of some enormous conspiracy. Not proof that every disagreement had been manufactured. Serena and I had genuinely hurt each other. She had mocked me, taken help for granted, used my work without checking. I had judged her, withdrawn instead of speaking, let resentment do the talking because direct rejection frightened me more than silent anger. But the pattern on the screen was impossible to ignore. Whenever something important passed between us indirectly, Mom was often standing in the middle. I don't need to know why she did it before I stop letting it work, I said. Serena looked at the 3 columns. What does that mean? It means if Mom says you're angry with me, I ask you. And if she says you said something, you ask me. What if she gets mad? I looked at her. Then she gets mad. Serena gave a nervous laugh. You make that sound easy. It isn't. That was the difference now. I no longer needed something to feel easy before deciding it was necessary. We were packing up when Serena hesitated. There's something else. My shoulders tightened. What? The charity copy. She turned her laptop toward me. These are the versions I was sent. I did not open anything stored privately. Serena brought up documents she had received and chose to show me. Halfway through the first page, I recognized a phrase. Then another. Both came from language I had written months earlier. Not just general ideas. My phrasing. I felt heat rise into my face. You used this. Serena looked down. Yes. You told me you only needed the first draft reviewed. I know. Then why is my language in later materials? Mom sent me some of your edits. The anger came fast this time. She sent you my files? She forwarded parts. Not everything. And you used them? Serena's jaw tightened. She said you told her to use whatever helped. Did you ask me? No answer. Serena. No. That mattered. I closed the document. Then this part is yours. Her head came up. I just told you Mom said you agreed. And you had my number. She was your mother too. Why would I assume she was lying? You didn't have to assume she was lying. You could have asked the person whose work you were using. Serena pushed her chair back an inch. So now we're back to this being all my fault. No. Sure sounds like it. No. It sounds like Mom gave you permission she didn't have, and you liked the permission enough not to check. Her face went pale. For a second, I regretted how sharp the sentence was. Then I asked myself whether I regretted the wording or simply the fact that Serena disliked hearing it. Those were not the same thing. She looked away. After a while, she said, "That's fair too." We left the cafe without hugging. That felt right. Whatever we were building did not need to pretend the old damage had disappeared simply because we had found someone else's fingerprints on parts of it. That evening, the professional education director replied about the seminar. The fall session was still open. She asked whether I wanted it. My calendar was on the wall beside my desk. The Saturday they proposed was 2 weeks after Mom's annual fundraising luncheon. Normally I would have looked at the entire month and mentally reserved the surrounding weekends in case she needed help preparing. Instead, I opened the invitation. Yes, I wrote. I'd be glad to teach it. Before I could reconsider, I sent the email and blocked the date on my calendar. The square turned blue. Mine. Not emergency space. Not family overflow. Mine. The phone rang while I was still looking at it. Martin. I almost let it go to voicemail, but answered. Hi. Nora. His voice sounded tired. Your mother says you're dragging Serena through old grievances. I leaned back in my chair. Did Serena tell you that? Silence. Martin? No. Then why are you telling me what Serena thinks? He exhaled. I'm trying to calm things down by repeating what Mom says Serena feels. She knows Serena. So do I. I'm talking to her directly. Another pause. Then Martin said something I did not expect. I asked Diane about that. About what? She was on speaker with Serena a few nights ago. Your mother said you were punishing Serena because you were embarrassed by what happened at the wedding. My fingers stopped against the desk. I never told Mom I wanted to punish Serena. I know. The words were quiet. I waited. Martin continued. I asked her afterward whether you actually said that. What did she say? She said, you know what Nora means. The room seemed to sharpen around me. Martin was not declaring Mom manipulative. He was not apologizing. He sounded like a man who had stepped on a stair he had used every day and discovered it was loose. "What did you say?" I asked. "Nothing." Of course. That had always been Martin's contribution to peace. Nothing. But this time he had noticed. "That's the problem," I said. He was quiet again. "Nora, I don't want this house turning into a war." "Then stop carrying messages." "I'm not carrying messages. You called to tell me Mom says Serena thinks I'm dragging her through old grievances." His breath caught slightly. There was no argument available. "Ask Serena what Serena thinks," I said. "Ask me what I think. If Mom tells you what either of us means, don't hand it over like it came from us. You're asking everyone to take sides." "No. I'm asking everyone to stop speaking for people who are available to speak for themselves." After the call ended, I sat in the office for several minutes. The blue block on my calendar remained visible beside me. Teaching seminar. A tiny square representing one Saturday. It should not have felt revolutionary. It did. The next morning, Aunt Carol called. I did not answer. Then Margaret. Then, a cousin I had not spoken to in 5 months. The family chat filled with variations of the same story. I was obsessed with old messages. I could not let Serena enjoy being newly married. I was jealous because the wedding had exposed how different our lives were. Mom had not said all of it herself. She didn't need to. Once aversion entered the family bloodstream, other people carried it for her. This time I did not chase it. When Aunt Margaret finally texted, "Is it true you're accusing Serena of lying to you for years?" I wrote back, "If you want to know what Serena said to me, Serena can tell you. If you want to know what I said, ask me directly." Nothing more. That afternoon, Serena called. "Mom just told me. Aunt Carol thinks you're trying to turn me against her. What do you think?" Serena went quiet, then said, "I think Mom really wants us to stop comparing notes." There was fear under the sentence. Maybe mine too. Because once two people start speaking directly, they lose a certain kind of protection. You can no longer blame the messenger for everything. You might discover the other person truly did fail you, or you might discover you wasted years being angry at something they never said. Either way, the old story becomes harder to live inside. "Then we keep one rule," I said. "What?" "If she tells either of us something important about the other, we verify it directly." Serena hesitated. "All right. No exceptions because she's upset." "All right. No exceptions because it's a holiday." A tiny laugh. "You really have thought about this?" "For about 30 years. She did not laugh at that. Later that evening, Martin called again. "Your mother wants everyone here Sunday." I looked at the new blue block on my calendar, then at the 3-column document still open on my screen. "What for?" "A family meeting." The phrase made me want to close the laptop, drive over immediately, and start managing everyone before the situation became worse. That reflex rose so fast, it almost moved my body before my mind caught up. Instead, I stayed in my chair. "What does she want to discuss?" Martin hesitated. "She says this has gone far enough." I looked at the 3rd column, the one full of things Serena and I had never heard directly from each other. For once, I agreed with her. So had I. By Thursday morning, 3 different relatives had used the exact same phrase with me. "Let things settle." Aunt Carol said it first when she caught me between meetings. "Nora, whatever is going on with you and Serena, just let things settle for a few weeks. There isn't anything going on between Serena and me that you need to manage." Carol lowered her voice as though someone might overhear us through the phone. "Your mother is beside herself. That's between Mom and me. You know how she gets when everyone is upset." I looked through the glass wall of my office at 2 communications associates waiting outside with folders in their hands. "Yes," I said. "I do." Carol tried again. "Just let things settle." An hour later, Martin texted nearly the same words. By lunch, a cousin who had not called me since Christmas sent, "Maybe everyone should let things settle before saying things they can't take back." The repetition was almost useful. Years earlier, I would have interpreted it as consensus. 3 people agreed with Mom, therefore I must be unreasonable. Now I heard the source beneath the echo. I called none of them back. When Margaret sent a longer message saying Serena had only been married a few days and deserved peace, I replied with the same sentence I had begun using whenever someone tried to carry another person's feelings to me. If Serena wants me to know what she thinks, she can tell me herself. Margaret answered with a thumbs up that felt less like agreement than surrender. It was enough. At work, I had an email, waiting from the chair of Serena's initiative. The committee had removed my name from the materials they were reviewing, and wanted one final confirmation before closing their internal notes. They attached a later version of the launch statement. I did not download it into my personal archive. I opened it long enough to answer the only question they had asked. Had I seen or reviewed that version before they contacted me? No. My response was 3 sentences. I had reviewed only the original draft Serena sent me on April 18th. The attached later version had not been provided to me before that morning. I could not speak to how it had been developed or approved. I attached my original email and the annotated first draft again because those were mine to provide. Nothing else. The committee chair thanked me and wrote that future communications would move through one designated coordinator, so responsibilities were clear. That should have ended my involvement. Instead, my phone lit up 15 minutes later. Serena, I answered. Did they contact you again? She asked. Yes. What did you send them? My original email, the first draft you gave me, and a confirmation that I hadn't seen the later version before today. She exhaled sharply. You could have called me first. For permission to tell them what I personally reviewed? That's not what I mean. What do you mean? Silence. A familiar one. This time I did not rush to fill it. They're making this into a whole process now, Serena said. They want one person approving communications. That sounds reasonable. It slows everything down. It also makes it clear who approved what. You really can't stop doing that, can you? Doing what? Turning everything into procedure. A week earlier, that accusation would have made me defend myself. Now I looked at the hospital announcement open on my other monitor and thought about how many disasters began because someone decided clarity was unnecessarily formal. I'm not on your committee, I said. If they want a process, that's their decision. And Mom's freaking out because she thinks they're blaming her. I haven't blamed Mom for anything with them. I know. That stopped me. Serena's voice had changed. I know you didn't, she repeated. They sent me the same note. Then, what's the problem? The problem is everyone is acting like Mom did something wrong. Did she tell them I was advising you? She says she was trying to help. That wasn't my question. Serena was quiet again. Before she could answer, someone knocked on my office door. I told her I had to go. She sounded irritated when she said goodbye, but she did not ask me to retract anything. That was new. By Friday, another message arrived from someone I had not expected. Ethan. We had spoken fewer than 10 times in the years he and Serena had been together. He was polite, private, and usually smart enough to leave Mercer family dynamics alone. His text was careful. Serena asked me to call you and explain why the launch matters to her. I told her she needs to talk to you herself. I'm not asking you to change your decision. I also didn't know anyone had described you as an advisor until this week. I read it twice. Then answered, thank you for telling me directly. A few minutes later he replied, I'm trying not to become another person carrying messages between you. That sentence made me sit back. Either Serena had told him more than I expected, or he had figured out the pattern quickly. It did not make him my ally. He was Serena's husband. His job was not to side with me. What mattered was that he had refused to become a new version of Martin. Later, Serena confirmed what had happened. She called me just before dinner. I asked Ethan to talk to you, she said. I know. He told you. Yes. He said, starting a marriage by making a third person fix our fights was probably stupid. That sounds like Ethan. He also said if I think you're wrong, I should tell you myself. And do you? Serena hesitated. I think you're being rigid. Okay. And I think the committee would have been fine if you'd waited until after the launch. Okay. Her irritation sharpened. That's it? You said what you think. I heard you. You don't have anything to say back? I disagree. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Serena laughed once, without humor. This is weird. What is? Talking to you without Mom, already telling me what you're going to say. I looked out my kitchen window at the rain moving across the streetlights. Yeah, I said. It is. The next evening, Martin called. He sounded more hesitant than usual. I need to tell you something, but I don't want you turning it into proof of anything. I can't promise what something proves before you tell me what it is. That's exactly the kind of answer that makes your mother crazy, Martin. He sighed. All right. I waited. Yesterday, Diane was writing something to Serena at the kitchen table. She typed for a while, deleted part of it, then said, "That'll only upset her." What did she delete? I don't know. Did you read it? No. Then we don't know what she removed. I know. He sounded almost relieved that I had not made more of it. But? I asked. But I realized I've heard her say things like that before. What things? That someone doesn't need to know something because it'll upset them, or because it's not the right time. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Did you say anything? I asked why she was editing a text to her own daughter. What did she say? That she knows how Serena reacts. The answer could have come from any year of my life. Mom knew what Serena could handle. Mom knew what I meant. Mom knew when somebody needed space. Mom knew what counted as support. Martin, I said, next time she tells you what I think, ask me. He was silent. And next time she tells you what Serena thinks, ask Serena. I'm not choosing sides. I didn't ask you to. It feels like you are. No. I'm asking you to stop repeating interpretations as if you heard the original words. He took a long breath. I think I may have done that more than I realized. That was the closest Martin had ever come to naming his part in any conflict. I could have pressed. Asked how often. Demanded examples. Asked why he had never noticed before. Instead I said, "Then notice now." He went quiet. After a moment he said, "Your mother still wants everyone here Sunday." I know. She wants 4 o'clock. I'm not available at 4. Nora. I told you I have a teaching commitment. It's just one afternoon. The sentence was so predictable I almost laughed. It's my afternoon. He did not answer immediately. What time are you available? After 5:30. I'll tell her. Don't tell her what I feel about it. A pause. Fine. The call ended. Sunday morning, my alarm went off at 7. For years, a pending family confrontation would have occupied every inch of the day around it. I would have slept badly, skipped breakfast, checked my phone while brushing my teeth, rehearsed speeches in the shower, and arrived early because being late would give someone another accusation. Instead, I made coffee. I reviewed my teaching notes. At 9:30, I walked into a conference classroom with 14 communications professionals waiting for me. The first 10 minutes were harder than I expected. Not because of the material, because part of my attention kept reaching toward the phone inside my bag. What if Mom called? What if Serena panicked? What if Martin moved the meeting without telling me? At 10, I turned the phone completely off. The movement felt almost ceremonial. No one in the room noticed. They were looking at the slide behind me. The session focused on communication ethics during high-pressure events. We discussed incomplete information, executive pressure, unofficial spokespeople, and what happened when people started attributing statements to someone who had never approved them. One participant raised her hand. How do you handle a leader who says process is slowing down the response? Sometimes process does slow things down, I said. That isn't automatically bad. A few people smiled. I continued. If information changes hands through too many people, you can end up arguing about what someone supposedly meant instead of what they actually said. The words left my mouth and landed somewhere unexpected inside me. Another participant asked, "So who owns the message?" I looked at the screen. Who has the right to speak for whom matters as much as the message itself? For a moment, I forgot the room. Then someone began taking notes, and the ordinary sound pulled me back. By the end of the session, I was tired in a way that felt clean. Useful without being used. There was a difference. Elena joined me afterward with 2 colleagues from another department. We walked to a small restaurant nearby and ate lunch without discussing Serena once. No emergencies, no documents spread between plates, no one asking me to rewrite an apology. Elena asked whether I would teach again if they offered another session. I think I would. Look at that, she said. A weekend activity that doesn't involve fixing somebody's disaster. I smiled. Don't jinx it. My phone came back on after lunch. 11 missed notifications. Only one was from Mom. Call me. I did not. Serena had sent 3 messages. The launch team needs help with the revised copy. Mom says you could fix this in an hour. Then, 10 minutes later. Ignore that. That was Mom. The third came after another half hour. Do you know anyone we can hire? I stopped on the sidewalk. There it was. Not, can you do it? Do you know someone we can hire? A different question. I called Serena. She answered immediately. I'm not taking the job, I said. I know. Do you? Yes, I heard frustration in her voice. But also something else. Resignation, maybe. Or the beginning of acceptance. I can send you 3 names, I said. People who do this kind of work independently. Can you tell them what happened? No. Serena inhaled. I'd have to explain it? Yes. Can you send them the documents? No. You contact them. You decide what you want to share. If they take the work, that relationship is yours. That sounds very official. It is. She gave a tired laugh. Fine. I sent her 3 professional contacts whose information was publicly available. Nothing else. No files. No private context. No advance call asking anyone to give her a discount. For once, a referral did not become another project I quietly inherited. Mom called before I reached my car. This time I answered. Nora, what is wrong with you? I just gave Serena 3 qualified people she can contact. You could fix this yourself. I'm not taking the job. It would take you 1 afternoon. I'm not taking the job. You keep saying that like you're talking to a stranger. I'm saying it because you keep asking the same question. Her breath went hard against the receiver. Serena is your sister. Yes. She just got married. Yes. She is under enormous pressure. I know. And you're going to make her hire a stranger when you could do this in your sleep? I'm not making her do anything. You know what I mean. The phrase stopped me. You know what I mean. Martin had repeated almost the same words from her 2 days earlier. The license to replace what someone said with what she decided they meant. No, I said. That's the problem. I'm done being told what everyone means. Mom went silent. Then her voice dropped. You have become incredibly cold. A familiar pain opened in my chest. It still worked. That was the frustrating part. Understanding a mechanism did not make you immune to it. For a second, I wanted to tell her I was not cold. I wanted to list everything I had done. Every phone call. Every birthday. Every weekend. Every crisis. Then I pictured the paragraph I had deleted from the group chat. Another defense entered into a system designed to reinterpret it. I'm available after 5:30, I said. If the meeting is still happening. So your little workshop comes first now? It was scheduled before the meeting. Family should come before a workshop. My grip tightened around my keys. There it was. Not Serena this time. Not a crisis. The rule itself. Your plans move because ours exist. I'll be there after 5:30. I ended the call. I expected guilt. What came instead was anger. Quiet, dense anger. Not enough to make me drive faster. Enough to make me keep walking at the same pace. I did not make it to the family meeting that evening. Neither did Serena. At 5 to 10, while I was home changing out of the clothes I had worn to teach, someone knocked hard on my front door. I checked the peephole. Serena stood outside. I opened it. What happened? She stepped inside without taking off her coat. Her face was pale. I need to show you something. Is Ethan okay? Yes. Mom? She's fine. Serena held up her phone. She just sent me this. I took it. Mom's message was less than a minute old. Nora plans to humiliate you at the family meeting. Don't trust what she says tonight. She's angry and wants everyone to see you as selfish. My stomach dropped. I never told her that. I know. Serena's voice was barely above a whisper. I called you this morning. You said you wanted to talk about the messages, not humiliate anyone. Yes. She told me not to come. I looked up. What? She said you wanted the meeting so you could confront me in front of everyone. We didn't schedule the meeting. She did. I know. My own phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Both of us turned toward it. I walked over. One message. Mom. Serena says she's done with you. Please stop contacting her. You've pushed this too far. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then, Serena crossed the kitchen slowly. She placed her phone beside mine. The screens glowed against the dark wood. On hers, Mom said I wanted to humiliate Serena. On mine, Mom said Serena wanted nothing more to do with me. Same evening. Same mother. 2 daughters standing 3 feet apart. This time there was no 11-year-old email archive. No damaged memory. No question about whether someone had misunderstood a conversation long ago. Serena was right there. So was I. She looked at me. What do we do? The old answer came to me immediately. Call Mom separately. Demand explanations. Let her tell each of us why the other was confused. Start 2 new conversations she could manage from the center. I picked up my phone, then stopped. No. Serena frowned. No what? We don't answer her separately. Her eyes dropped to the 2 screens. What do you want to do? I looked at the messages again. For most of my life, Mom had been the person I called when I wanted to understand Serena, and Serena had called Mom when she wanted to understand me. Suddenly, the structure looked almost embarrassingly simple. We go together, I said. To the meeting? Yes. And say what? I slid both phones closer until the edges touched. We don't need 20 years. Serena stared at the 2 messages. No, she said quietly. We really don't. We really don't. Serena kept staring at the 2 phones on my kitchen table. The screens dimmed at almost the same time, leaving our reflections faintly visible in the black glass. For several minutes, neither of us moved. Part of me still wanted to call Diane immediately. I could already hear the questions I wanted answered. Why did you tell Serena I planned to humiliate her? Why did you tell me Serena was done with me? How many times had you done this before? But questions had always been one of my mother's favorite places to hide. Every question created room for context, explanation, emotion, history, and eventually another argument about my tone. I closed my laptop. We take 3 things, I said. Serena looked up. 3? The messages from tonight. The charity message. London. What about your divorce? No. Christmas? No. The business stuff? No. She frowned. Why not? Because if we walk in there carrying 20 years, we'll spend 4 hours arguing about 20 years. Serena sat slowly. And 3 examples are supposed to fix this? They're not supposed to fix anything. That was the first time I heard myself say it and actually believed it. We're deciding what we do next. That's all. Serena rubbed both palms against the knees of her jeans. What if she denies everything? Then she denies it. What if she cries? I almost smiled. She probably will. What if Martin takes her side? Then he does. Serena stared at me, as though I had suddenly become much taller. You really are okay with losing everyone, aren't you? The sentence reached the oldest part of me. The girl who had learned to give up the bigger bedroom. The woman who had declined London. The daughter who had kept weekends open because someone might need something. No, I said. I'm not okay with losing people. Serena waited. I'm just less willing to lose myself to keep them. We arrived at Diane and Martin's house together. That alone changed the atmosphere. Mom opened the door, expecting 1 daughter at a time. Her eyes moved from Serena to me, and back again. You came together. Serena answered before I could. Yes. Diane's mouth tightened. Martin was in the living room. Aunt Carol sat on one end of the sofa, which surprised me. So did Margaret. Apparently the family meeting had gained an audience. I stopped just inside the room. Why are they here? Mom folded her arms. Because this is affecting more than just the 3 of us. Carol gave me a sympathetic smile that made my shoulders tighten. Nora, nobody wants a fight. I didn't invite one. Mom gestured toward the chairs. Then sit down. The old version of me would have obeyed, simply because refusing would look hostile. Instead, I took the chair nearest the door because I wanted to be able to leave when I chose. Serena sat beside me. Diane remained standing. I don't understand how we got here, she began. I have spent my entire life trying to keep my daughters close, and now apparently you both think I'm some kind of enemy. There were already too many doors inside that sentence. Trying. Close. Enemy. Any one of them could have swallowed the conversation. I reached into my bag and placed my phone on the coffee table. Serena did the same. Mom looked at them. What is this? Read mine, I said. She didn't move. Serena unlocked her screen and read aloud. Nora plans to humiliate you at the family meeting. Don't trust what she says tonight. She's angry and wants everyone to see you as selfish. The room went still. Then I read mine. Serena says she's done with you. Please stop contacting her. You've pushed this too far. Aunt Carol shifted on the sofa. Martin looked down. Diane's face changed only slightly. You were both upset. Neither of us told you that, Serena said. Mom turned toward her. I know you. That isn't what she said, Serena replied. Diane looked back at me. And I know you too, Nora. I leaned forward. Which daughter were you telling the truth to? Her lips parted. For 1 second, there was no answer. It was the cleanest silence I had ever heard in that house. Then, Mom drew herself upright. I was trying to prevent exactly this. Prevent what? You attacking each other. We were standing in the same kitchen when you sent those messages. I didn't know that. That's not the point. It absolutely is. If I had known you were together, I would have phrased things differently. Serena turned toward me. Neither of us needed to say it. Diane had just defended the method, instead of denying it. Mom saw the look between us. Oh, don't do that. Do what? Serena asked. Sit there acting like you've caught me in some crime. No one said crime, I said. Then why are you interrogating me? I asked which message was true. They were both true emotionally. I sat back. There it was. Not what we said. What she believed our words should have meant. Diane continued. Faster now. Nora, you were angry. Serena was overwhelmed. I knew if the two of you went into that meeting already defensive, things would become ugly. You told each of us the other had already rejected her. I was trying to give you space. You told me Serena was done with me. Because you needed to stop pushing. Serena's voice sharpened. She told me not to contact Nora because Nora wanted to humiliate me. Mom looked at her. You were panicking. I was not panicking. You were. No, Mom. You decided I was. The word decided stayed in the room. Martin raised a hand slightly. Maybe everybody needs to slow down. I almost laughed. Let things settle. Dressed in different clothes. Instead, I pulled a printed copy from my bag. Mom's message about the charity draft. Nora looked it over. She said she's happy to help with communications. Diane stared at the page. What about it? I placed my original email beside it. I told you I reviewed one draft and specifically said it was not professional approval. You did help. I reviewed one draft. So why did Serena receive a message saying I was happy to help with communications? Mom's voice rose. I didn't change anything important. I had not said she changed anything. Across from me, Martin's head lifted. Diane continued, before anyone interrupted her. I only took out the part about it being one draft because Serena would have thought you didn't support her. Serena whispered, Mom. Diane turned toward her. What? You would have? You don't know that. Yes, I do. I'm your mother. The room seemed to shrink. For years, those words had ended things. I'm your mother. Therefore, I know what you feel. Therefore, I know what she means. Therefore, I know which sentence you need to hear, and which one you don't. Mom picked up the original email. You make everything sound harsher than it is, Nora. You always have. I wrote exactly what I agreed to. You wrote like a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. That's not the point. It is to me. I took the email back. I said one draft. You decided Serena shouldn't hear that. She was trying to build something, and you were trying to help her. Yes. By volunteering me. I knew you would help. The sentence came out without hesitation. Not hoped. Not thought. Knew. I looked at her. That's the problem. For once, she had no idea what I meant. Serena moved forward in her chair. I need to say something. Mom sighed. Serena, you don't have to let Nora pressure you into taking responsibility for things that weren't your fault. Serena's face hardened. That is exactly what I'm talking about. Diane blinked. Serena looked at me. What happened at the wedding was my fault. Nobody moved. She kept going. I called Nora a failure because I wanted Howard to think I was the impressive one. Mom had been telling me he respected founders and people who took risks, and I didn't want him comparing us. Mom interrupted. I never told you to insult her. I didn't say you did. Serena swallowed. I did that. The room felt unfamiliar, not because Serena was apologizing. Because Mom could not insert herself into the sentence without Serena removing her again. Serena continued. I also used Nora's writing in later charity materials. Carol looked confused. You stole it? No. Serena shook her head. Mom sent parts of it and told me. Nora said to use whatever helped. Diane immediately said, she had already helped you. Serena turned toward her. And I should have asked Nora. You shouldn't have needed to. Yes, I should. Mom's expression froze. Serena's voice grew steadier. I had her number. I could have asked. I didn't because it was easier to believe she had agreed. She looked at me again. And I liked believing she was jealous of me, because then I didn't have to think about how much work she had done for me. I felt something loosen in my chest. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the first apology Serena had ever given me that did not end by asking me to make her feel better about it. Mom doesn't make the wedding disappear, she said. No, I answered. She doesn't make the charity stuff disappear either. No. Serena nodded. That was enough. Diane sat down at last. So this is what you wanted, she said to me. You wanted her to turn against me. No. Look at her. I am. You've been filling her head with this for days. Serena laughed once. Actually, Mom, the whole problem is that Nora stopped letting other people fill my head with what she supposedly thinks. Mom's face reddened. You are being incredibly disrespectful. Serena did not answer. Martin cleared his throat. Diane may have handled some things badly, but she loves both of you. I looked at him. I'm not asking whether she loves us. He frowned. Then what are you asking? If Diane tells you Serena said something about me, will you repeat it to me without asking Serena? Martin's eyes moved toward Mom. The reflex was so obvious now that even Carol noticed it. Martin, I said. He looked back at me. I could almost see the last few days moving behind his eyes. Mom saying I was punishing Serena. His own question about whether I had actually said it. Diane deleting part of a message because it would only upset Serena. All the years he had chosen peace, by carrying whatever interpretation made the room quietest. No, he said. Mom turned. Martin. He held up a hand. If Serena supposedly says something about Nora, I'll ask Serena. Diane stared at him. And if Mom tells you I said something? I asked. I'll ask you. He sounded uncomfortable. Good. Real change often looked less like courage than discomfort somebody finally stopped avoiding. Diane stood again. This is absurd. You're all acting like I'm not allowed to know my own children. No one said that, Martin replied. She stared at him as if he had slapped the table. I stood. It was time. Not because she understood. Because she didn't have to. For now, I'm going low contact. Mom's eyes snapped toward me. What does that mean? It means I'll decide when I answer calls and messages. I'm not discussing Serena through you. I'm not listening to what you say she thinks about me. And I don't want you telling her what I supposedly mean. You cannot control what I say. No. I control what I participate in. Her lips tightened. I continued. Do not volunteer my work, my name, or my professional role to anyone. If you need help with something, you ask. If I say no, the answer remains no. So you're punishing me. No. That's exactly what this is. I'm telling you what contact with me requires. Her eyes filled. Aunt Carol shifted closer to her. Nora, she's your mother. I looked at Carol. I know who she is. Mom pressed a hand to her chest. After everything I have done for you. The sentence still had power. Maybe it always would. But power was not the same as authority. If you want to repair this, I said, I need specific things to change. What more could you possibly want? If you told someone I said something I didn't say, correct it with that person. If you changed the context of something I wrote, stop doing it. If you don't know what I think, ask me. I already said I was trying to protect both of you. That explains what you call it. It doesn't undo what it did. Diane shook her head. So you're cutting me out of the family? No. Then what are you doing? changing the conditions under which you have access to me. She stared at me. And if I don't agree to your conditions? A year earlier, I would have spent an hour trying to persuade her. At 31, I had given up London because she framed sacrifice as love. At 39, during my divorce, I had accepted silence from Serena because Mom told me silence was what Serena chose. At 42, I understood something embarrassingly simple. A boundary was not an agreement. Then the boundary still exists. Mom started talking before I finished picking up my bag. I heard words like cruel, selfish, dramatic. Carol said my name. Martin told Diane to let me go. Serena stood too. I turned to her. You don't have to leave because I am. I know. That mattered. I walked through the hallway without waiting for the house to become calm again. At the front door, my hand paused on the knob. There had always been one more sentence. One more explanation. One more attempt to make sure nobody could accuse me of leaving badly. I opened the door. Cold evening air moved across my face. Then I stepped outside. Nothing followed me except the sound of the door closing. The consequences were quieter than I expected. No one's life collapsed the next morning. There was no dramatic public exposure. Howard Bell never appeared to deliver a verdict, and I was grateful for that. The charity committee completed its review over the next few weeks. Serena forwarded me the final message because my name had been part of the original confusion. They designated one communications coordinator and required clear approval before anyone was described as an advisor or reviewer. Diane's informal communications role ended. Not because a committee decided she was a terrible mother. Because informal authority had created an attribution problem, and they replaced it with a process. Mom blamed me anyway. For several weeks, she sent messages ranging from anger to sorrow. I ruined Serena's launch. I embarrassed her. I had always been too rigid. I was making Martin choose sides. I answered very few. When a message said, "Your sister is devastated by what you've done," I replied, "Serena can tell me that herself." Serena did not. Her launch was delayed, not destroyed. She hired one of the consultants whose contact information I had given her. She paid for the work. The first time she told me what it cost, she laughed. "You were doing this for free? For years." That was stupid. Yes. She looked offended. I meant stupid of us. I know. Ethan stayed out of our disagreements. If Serena tried to send something through him, he sent her back to me. I knew because Serena complained about it herself. "Your influence is ruining my marriage," she joked once. "No. Your husband just doesn't want another job." She laughed. We were still learning how to talk. Sometimes she got defensive. Sometimes I interpreted a delay as rejection before reminding myself to ask. Once, she canceled lunch, and I spent an hour certain Diane had said something. Then Serena texted a photograph of a flat tire. I stared at it and laughed so hard I had to sit down. Not every silence was a conspiracy. That was part of healing too. Martin called me directly more often. At first he sounded awkward without Diane's opinions filling the spaces. We discussed ordinary things. His physical therapy. A leaking faucet. A baseball game. The first time he started, "Your mother thinks," he stopped himself. Then said, "Never mind, she can tell you." It was not redemption. It was practice. Some relatives remained distant. Carol thought I had gone too far. Margaret eventually asked me directly what happened. I told her only what belonged to me. I stopped trying to win unanimous approval. That freedom surprised me almost as much as anything else. The weekend seminar led to another invitation. Then another. By spring, I was mentoring a small group of younger communications professionals once a month. Nothing about my job title changed overnight. I did not become famous. I did not suddenly earn millions. But Saturday stopped meaning available. Sometimes it meant teaching. Sometimes dinner with Elena and 2 colleagues. Sometimes grocery shopping followed by 3 hours with a book and my phone in another room. The first few times nobody needed me. The quiet felt uncomfortable. Then it began to feel like a life. Diane and I remained low contact. Her early messages rarely made it past explanation. I only wanted my daughters close. "I knew you both better than you knew yourselves. One day, you'll understand why mothers do these things." I stopped answering arguments disguised as apologies. Nearly 9 months after the wedding, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. Mom's handwriting. I almost left it unopened. Then I carried it upstairs and set it on the kitchen table. I opened it after dinner. The letter was not perfect. It did not transform her. But for the first time, it contained sentences without the word, but attached to them. She admitted she had sometimes shortened messages because she believed one of us would react badly. She admitted she had told Serena I would help without asking me. She admitted she had described my intentions to other relatives instead of telling them to speak with me. Then came a sentence that made me stop. I believed being the person everyone came through kept this family together. I am beginning to understand it may have kept all of you dependent on me instead. I read it twice, then folded the letter. I did not call her. One accurate letter could not repair decades. Change needed time. So did I. Low contact stayed. The following Saturday, I finished a morning workshop just before noon. Outside the training center, sunlight reflected off the glass buildings across the street. My phone had been silent in my bag for 3 hours, and I had not once wondered whether someone was angry with me. When I turned it on, Serena had sent one message. Lunch? Just us. No emergency. I smiled. For most of my life, a message from Serena had meant something needed fixing. A vendor. A post. A crisis. An argument. A problem somebody had already decided belonged to the older sister. Now it was only an invitation. I checked my calendar. Nothing at 1. I could have said no. That realization mattered almost as much as what I chose. 1 o'clock works, I wrote. Then I put the phone back in my bag. I did not wonder whether Diane knew we were meeting. I did not check the family chat. I did not rehearse what I would say if someone called me selfish. For most of my life, I thought belonging meant being useful enough that no one would send me away. At 42, I understood something I wished I had learned much younger. Home was supposed to be the place where I did not have to disappear in order to stay.